Hungarian Folk Tales. The Little Cockerel and the Hedge. Once upon a time, a little cockerel went out under the hedge to scratch around. He scratched and scratched around until the hedge was uprooted. Along came a magpie and asked the uprooted hedge, "Now what's the matter with you, hedge? Only yesterday you were standing here all healthy and strong." "Dear me, brother magpie," replied the hedge, "the little cockerel came out to scratch around under me, and now I'm uprooted." "Well then, I'll pull out my fine tail," said the magpie, and he pulled out his own tail feathers just like that. Off he flew to a walnut tree. The walnut tree was astonished at how scruffy the magpie looked. So the walnut tree asked, "What's happened to you, brother magpie? Only yesterday you had a fine tail, and now you are all scruffy." "Dear me, brother tree," answered the magpie, "the little cockerel went out to scratch around under the hedge was uprooted, and I pulled out my fine tail." "Well then, I'll clip off my fine twigs," said the walnut tree, and he clipped off his twigs just like that. Around noon came a deer to rest under the walnut tree out of the great heat. She could see that the walnut tree was now completely bald. "What happened to you, walnut tree? Only yesterday you were green and flourishing. Now today you're all bald." "Dear me, sister dear," answered the walnut tree, "the little cockerel went out this morning to scratch around under the hedge. The hedge was uprooted, the magpie pulled out its fine tail feather, and I clipped off all my twigs." "Well then, I'll chase away my two fine sons," said the deer, and she sent them both away just like that, for which she grieved and grieved. When she felt thirsty, she went to the well for a drink. Now the well was astonished to see the deer appear alone, because she always brought her two fine sons with her. So the well asked, "How is it you are on your own today, sister dear? Where have you left your two fine sons?" "Dear me, brother well," said the deer, "the little cockerel went out this morning to scratch around under the hedge. The hedge was uprooted, the magpie pulled out its fine tail, the walnut tree clipped off all his twigs, and I sent my two fine sons away. Well then, I'll turn my fine wine into blood," said the well. And so he did. Now when Sarah, the serving girl, went to the well with her pail, she asked the well, "What's this, well? How is it today that you're full of blood instead of your sweet water?" "Dear me, Sarah," said the well, "the little cockerel went out this morning to scratch around under the hedge. The hedge was uprooted, the magpie pulled out his fine tail, the walnut tree clipped off all his twigs, the deer sent her two fine sons away, and the water in me has turned to blood. Well then, I'll beat my own head with this pail." And so she did, and off she went with a swollen, battered head back to her mistress. Her mistress asked, "What happened to you, Sarah?" "Dear me, mistress," said Sarah, "the little cockerel went out this morning to scratch around under the hedge. The hedge was uprooted, the magpie pulled out his fine tail, the walnut tree clipped off all his twigs, the deer sent her two fine sons away, the water in the well turned to blood, and I beat my own head with the pail. Well then, I'll spread my dough all over the wall." It was just ready for kneading, but she went ahead and spread it all over the wall. Now when the master of the house came home that evening, he saw that the dough was spread all over the wall. "Have you gone mad or what, dear wife, that you spread the dough all over the wall?" "Dear me, husband, the little cockerel went out this morning to scratch around under the hedge. The hedge was uprooted, the magpie pulled out his fine tail, the walnut tree clipped off all his twigs, the deer sent her two fine sons away, the water in the well turned to blood, Sarah beat her own head with a pail, and I spread the dough all over the wall. Well then, I'll shave off my fine beard." And he shaved it off just like that. Not long later, the son of the house came home and saw his father with a face like a plucked chicken. He asked, "What happened to you, father dear?" "Son, there's been nothing but trouble here all day. The little cockerel went out this morning to scratch around under the hedge. The hedge was uprooted. The magpie pulled out his fine tail. The walnut tree clipped off all his twigs. The deer sent her 2 fine sons away. The water in the well turned to blood. Sarah beat her own head with a pail. Your mother spread the dough all over the wall, and I went and shaved off my fine beard. Fair enough, said the lad. I'll go out and cut off the legs of our 4 oxen. With that, he picked up his axe, went to the byre, and straight away cut off a foreleg of one of the oxen. He was just about to take the axe to another when a soldier just happened to arrive and cried to him, "Have you lost your mind, my lad? What are you doing to that ox?" "Dear me, soldier, sir." The little cockerel went out this morning to scratch around under the hedge. The hedge was uprooted. The magpie pulled out his fine tail. The walnut tree clipped off all his twigs. The deer sent her 2 fine sons away. The water in the well turned to blood. Sarah beat her own head with a pail. My mother spread the dough all over the wall. My father shaved off his fine beard completely. And now I'm cutting off the legs of our 4 oxen. "Only when the moon turns green," shouted the soldier, and gave the lad such a beating with the flat of his sword that it was all he could do to stagger back into the house. The soldier drove the oxen off to the fair and sold them. With his time served as a soldier, he was free to marry, and from the oxen prize he threw a great feast of a wedding, and they all lived happily ever after. Hungarian Folk Tales. Tiny Tom and the Lily Princess. Once upon a time, far, far away, over the ocean and beyond, there lived a king, and with the king lived a queen. And they had a very tiny son. No matter how many doctors they took him to, he just wouldn't grow. Tiny he was, and tiny he remained. The king grieved much over this, the queen even more, so much so that she fell ill. On her deathbed she lay and called for the king. She said to him, "All I ask of you is that when you bury me, have a lily planted on my grave and have it guarded day and night so that no one can steal it." She spoke, and straight away she died. The king was much in grief. "If only my son were big, who can I leave my kingdom to when I am dead?" He buried his queen in pomp, wept over her, and mourned her. And he sent a proclamation across the kingdom calling for everyone who had a lily to bring it to the court so that one could be chosen for the queen's grave. They brought lilies by the cartload, but they couldn't agree which one was the finest of all. The king could hear all this uproar and went down into the courtyard. "What's all this quarrelling about?" One of the gardeners replied. "There are so many lilies here that we can hardly move, but we can't decide which one is the finest of all." "Where are you, Tiny Tom, my son? Come here and do something useful for a change. Close your eyes and pick a lily." So Tiny Tom closed his eyes and groped around like a blind man. And do you know what? The lily he picked was beautiful, and every bloom on it sparkled like a diamond. The king asked, "Who brought us this lily?" "Your Majesty, I brought it from Fairy Helen's garden." "Well then, you plant it and keep guard over it so that no one can steal it." "If you please, Your Majesty, may I ask that you send Tiny Tom with me? So if I should doze off, he'll be awake and alert." "Very well then," said the king. And so it happened. The old woman planted the flower and guarded it as if it were her life itself. So there they were, keeping guard until the old woman said, "Tiny Tom, I'm going to lie down for a while and I'll drop off to sleep. You stay guard over the lily so that no one can take it." "No one can take it? You sleep well, old lady." And while Tiny Tom was keeping guard, out of nowhere appeared a little man. "Good evening, Tom. Do you know what kind of flower you're guarding here?" "Well, I know that it's a lily and it comes from Fairy Helen's garden." You see, that Lily is the princess from Dwarfland. Let me tell you. Helen once went to see the king in Dwarfland and took a great liking to the princess. So she begged the king to let her have his daughter for a week or two, and he did. Helen was envious of her beauty, and she treated the princess so badly that she wept and wept, and then she died. When she was buried, that lily grew out of her grave, and it spoke once. Take me to the grave where a mother cried as much as I did over her dwarf of a son. And when the old nurse heard this, she pulled up the lily and brought it here. But Fairy Helen's own nurse heard all of this and told Fairy Helen. Now Helen can never be at peace until the flower is stolen back from here. Come here, and I'll see to your troubles. And at that, the little dwarf of a man pulled his beard from between his legs, and he disappeared as if he had never been there. Tom was thinking and thinking and tried to stay awake. Suddenly, he heard a fluttering and rustling. 12 fairies appeared. They made a circle around Tom, dancing, thinking that they could make him dizzy and one of them could steal the lily from the grave. But Tom was sharp. He shook the old woman awake and said, "Get up, old lady, they've come for the lily." So the old woman jumped up and took out her old spindle, and then, swish, swish, she went at them. "Be off with you from here," she said, and she beat and slapped the fairies until they flew off back to fairyland without the lily. There they told Fairy Helen that they had failed to bring the lily with them. Now she had a 7-legged horse, and she mounted it, and off she went. Now as Tiny Tom was keeping guard, he suddenly heard a voice. "Tom, I think they're going to take me away. Fairy Helen is coming." And out of the lily there came a tiny young woman, more beautiful and radiant than the golden sun itself. Tom, if only I had my butterfly carriage for us to fly away in." And at the very moment she said that, 6 butterflies came flying there, drawing a fine carriage. The dwarf princess asked, "Will you come with me, Tom?" "Of course I will. Never will I part from you." Up they went, up and up, into the bright blue sky. The princess turned and said, "Tom, look back and tell me what you see. Oh, it's Fairy Helen. Don't let her catch up with us." Up and up they flew as fast could be. Suddenly, a huge sheet of flame came licking at Tom's back. "Tom, look back and tell me what you see now. Oh, it's Fairy Helen. Her horse's breath is aflame, and I can feel its heat. Just let us get up between the sun and the stars and the moon, for up there she has no powers." Now when they reached Dwarfland, the joy was great indeed. So pleased was the king to see his long-lost daughter that he swept her into his arms and covered her in kisses. He did the same with Tom. He said straight away that he would give his daughter's hand to Tom and make him king of the land. Then came the great wedding feast. There was no end to the dwarfs there, each one more handsome than the next, and everybody lived happily ever after. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Water Fairy. Once upon a time, in a land far, far away, there lived a miller, and the miller had a wife. They had a fine big mill, and they earned their keep and passed their days. There was just one thing that caused them grief, and that was they had no child. And they grew poorer and poorer every day until they had nothing at all. The poor man lamented night and day that a curse had been laid upon them. Off he went one evening and sat by the mill pond. There he wept. All at once he heard a voice. "Listen, poor man. I'll help you in your troubles. I'll make you richer by far than ever before. All you have to do is give me the living creature that you have not got at home." So the poor man thought to himself, "What is it that I haven't got at home? Perhaps a dog? Perhaps a cat? What could it be? Right you are, I agree." The poor man cheered up and set off for home. He was still on his way when his servant came running towards him. "Quickly, Master Miller, the mistress has just given birth to a fine, healthy boy." Well now, the miller ran all the way back to the mill pond. Come here, you evil spirit, you have taken my child." But no one appeared. Home he went and told what had happened. They threw their arms around each other and wept and wept. What was going to become of their child? When would that voice take him away, raise the boy as the light of their lives? They never ever let him near the mill pond. And when he grew older, they told him that he was not to go there because the water fairy would carry him away. And the boy never went there. He avoided the place altogether. Now they became wealthier than anyone in the village before or since. Where they laid down a florin, the next day there were two. Time and tide went by and they sent their son to a master woodman so that he would be a forester. So taken was the master with the lad, so quick and clever he was, that the master gave him his own daughter in marriage. The young man went all through the forest hunting. One day, he saw a fine stag. He aimed at the stag, but the stag vanished, clean out of sight. Off he went again on the following day, and once again the stag was enticing the young man, and so it went on for 3 or 4 days. His wife spoke to him. "Where is it you go every day, neither eating or drinking, only concerned for your forest? But don't go near the mill pond, just so that no trouble will befall you." "I never go that way, my dear. I only go hunting in the forest." Once again he set off, tracked the stag, and brought him down. He thought of skinning it, but in skinning it, he got covered in blood, so he decided to go to the river and wash himself. There he set down his cap and his satchel. But once he put his 2 hands into the water, 2 mighty arms rose out of the water, fastened themselves around his neck, and dragged him in and under. His good wife was waiting for him at home. She ran to the forest to the mill pond, and there she saw his cap and his satchel. "Dear God in heaven, what my father-in-law warned about has happened." Up and down the edge of the waters she raced. "Give me back my good husband, water fairy." But the water was silent. She ran and ran until tiredness overcame her, and she lay down and fell asleep. In her dream she saw, not far away, a shack in which there lived an old woman who knew many, many secrets. She awoke, and just as in her dream, off she went to the shack. She knocked at the door and spoke of her problem in floods of tears. There, my dear," said the old woman. "When the moon is full, off you go to the place and sit at the edge of the waters. I'll give you a brush, and with it you must brush your hair." So the young wife waited until the moon became full. She went to the edge of the waters, let loose her hair, and began to brush it. And then, all of a sudden, her husband stuck his head out of the water, but he said not a word, and then he vanished again to the watery depths. She went home and told the old woman what had happened. The old woman said, "Tomorrow evening you must bring a spinning wheel with you, and there you must spin." And so she did. She brought a spinning wheel, sat there at the spot, and began to spin. And when she span, once again the water frothed, and her husband appeared up to his waist. But again they were not able to exchange a word between themselves. "Off you go, dear girl. This is the 3rd night. On this flute you should play a sweet, sad tune. Then you'll see what happens." And so it was. The young wife sat there on the same spot and played. At first the water started to froth, and in she jumped and embraced her husband. But then such a storm blew up that her husband was carried off to one shore and the wife to the other. They were thrown so far apart that she stayed on one and he stayed on the other. Then the man took work as a swineherd and the woman as a cook. The swineherd brought the pigs out to feed every day, and the woman brought food at midday to her master in the meadows. When she brought the food to the master, she saw that there was a swineherd off in the distance. So she walked towards him, and they began to speak. And as they spoke, the young woman asked the man where he had come from, and the man began to tell her of how he had been born, and how the water fairy had carried him away, and how he'd been parted from his darling wife. And as he told all these things to his own wife, her eyes opened once again, and she saw that he was her husband. Then they embraced and kissed each other sweetly and went home. They had many, many children, and they all lived happily ever after. This is the end of my tale. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Lad Who Watched Over the Rabbits. Once upon a time, very long ago, and far away, there lived a king, and the king had a daughter, so beautiful that even the painters could not paint her beauty. Now there came a time for her to take a husband, and the king said that he would give her in marriage to the man who could catch the apple she threw among them. So they came together, the princes and the dukes, the counts and the gypsy lads, to catch the apple. But try as they would, not one of them succeeded. But one day who should turn up but a village lad? Once again the princess flung the apple, and the lad caught it as if it had been thrown straight to him. But the king was not overjoyed at this, that a come-and-go-as-he-pleases lad was to be his son-in-law. Well then, young fellow, I don't know what kind of lad you are to catch the apple, but there's another trial in store for you. I have rabbits aplenty, and you have to watch over them. If you can watch them carefully, well and good. But if you can't, then it's off with your head. Now the lad was downcast to hear that he had to watch over the rabbits, for never before had he been a watcher of rabbits. And all of a sudden, an old woman appeared. She said, "Don't be downcast, young fellow. I shall give you a whistle, and when you go off to the meadow, all you have to do is blow it, and you'll see how useful it will be." Then they let the rabbits out, and they ran off in 1,000 directions. The lad blew his whistle, and the rabbits lined up like soldiers on parade. The king looked out and wondered what kind of lad could keep the rabbits in devilish good order. So the king said to his daughter, "Listen, daughter dear, dress yourself up as a poor young woman and take a satchel with you to the meadow and ask the lad for a rabbit, so that in the evening when he brings them home, there'll be one rabbit missing." So the princess dressed herself up in the clothes of a poor young woman, put a satchel under her arm, and went out to the meadow. "Good day to you, good rabbit herd. God save you. What brings you here, young lady?" "I'm not a lady. I'm just a poor young girl. I came to see if you could give me a rabbit." "Of course I can," he said, "if your highness will give me a kiss." "I'm not a princess," said she. And she was really fierce in denying it because she didn't want the lad to know who she was. But he knew which way the wind was blowing. "Well, just one kiss and I'll give you a rabbit." So the princess thought for a moment, to kiss or not to kiss, but in the end, she gave him a kiss. Right away the lad took hold of a rabbit and put it in the satchel for her, so she set off home. But she hadn't got halfway home when the lad blew the whistle again, and the rabbit jumped out of the satchel and scampered back to him. The princess got home, and the king said to her, "Well, did you get a rabbit?" She looked in the satchel and, sure enough, there was nothing in it at all. So she said to her father, "I tried and I asked, but he didn't give me a rabbit," because she was ashamed to say that she had given him a kiss. So the king said, "Never mind, I'll try." So the king dressed up as a poor country lad and took a satchel, and off he went on a donkey to the meadow where the village lad was to be found. When he got there, he said, "God save you, young fellow. How goes it with you?" "Well enough," said the lad. "I have the rabbits to watch over. Have pity on me, young fellow, and give me a rabbit, for I'm as poor can be, and sick, and I need the meat of a rabbit to give me strength." "Willingly," said the lad, "if you kiss the tail of your donkey." So the king thought for a moment, and in the end he kissed the tail of the donkey. Well then, the lad gave him a rabbit. The king took the satchel under his arm and sat astride the donkey. But he hadn't got halfway home when the lad blew that whistle of his, and the rabbit jumped out of the satchel and left it as empty as the day is long. The king got home, opened the satchel, and saw not a rabbit there at all. The princess asked him, "Father dear, did you bring a rabbit?" "Of course I didn't bring one. He wouldn't give me one." Evening came, and the king looked out of the window to see how the lad had lined up the rabbits to come home. Like soldiers on parade, in they came, and all of them present and correct. "Well done, young fellow," said the king. "You've done a very good job. You've passed the test. Now there's one more for you, and if you pass that too, then you'll have my daughter as your wife. Now I want you to tell me as many lies as will fit in a sack." So the lad began to think about what lies he could tell. All the king's councillors sat around in a circle with the lad in the middle, and he started to tell lies. Well, he lied and lied about anything and everything that came into his head. But the king called out, "The sack's not full yet. Carry on with your lying." So he carried on. "Well, you know, when I was looking after the rabbits, the princess came to me and asked for a rabbit and gave me a kiss in return. Well, didn't the princess grow as red in the face as a rose in bloom? She couldn't get over her shame. And after that," said the lad, "the king himself came, and I told him to kiss the donkeys." "It's full," shouted the king. "You don't have to say another word. A big sack full of lies." So the lad didn't say another word. And that's how the king gave his daughter to the lad, who watched over the rabbits. Together they lived happily and peacefully. And when the king died, the lad became king. His kingdom was so blessed that it's a pity he isn't still living today. And that's the end of my story. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Cursed Castle. Once upon a time, long ago and far away, there lived a poor woman who had a daughter. They were both so very poor that they had to live in a crumbling house, and that was all they had. One day the old woman fell ill, and she called to her daughter, "My sweet darling daughter, I am sure I shall soon die. I have nothing to leave you, so you should go, find work as a servant, and try to live as best you can." And with that, she closed her eyes and died. She was buried by the people of the village because her daughter had no money to pay for the funeral. All she had was a blanket. So she took her blanket and off she went to see the world. From time to time she tried begging for food or shelter, but nobody ever gave her anything. The people said, "You're strong enough to find work," which was true, but the girl was lazy. She found shelter in a garden and stayed there until summer passed. Then, when autumn came, she hid in sheds and barns and stables. One fine day she arrived in a town, and it was there that she heard that the king had a castle for sale. The castle would be sold to the person who would not haggle or bargain but pay the price on the spot. So the girl thought to herself, "I will buy that castle. I'll lie and say that I have the asking price." And she did exactly that. She went up to the king, telling him that she would buy the castle. "Well, well," said the king. "The king has as many windows as there are days in the year, and as many doors as there are days, and rooms as there are months, and that is why the price to pay is 365 florins, no more, no less. If you can pay up without bargaining, the castle will be yours." "There will be no bargain, your majesty. I do not have the money with me now, for many debtors owe me this amount. But I promise to pay you back as soon as I get my money, and all you have to do is set a deadline." "Very well, young lady. Let us agree on 365 days. "Very well," she thought. "That is exactly 1 year from now, and even if they hang me after that, on my dying day, I will be able to tell everyone that I slept in a real royal castle." The king gave her the keys, and the girl walked up to her new room. Once she was there, she inspected all 12 rooms, one by one. Then she locked the door and placed one half of a blanket on the floor and used the second half to cover herself. All of a sudden she heard something that sounded like a meowing cat. "Meow, meow." "Poor cat, you must be as lonely as me." So she got up and let in the cat. It was a horribly fat black cat. "Come over here. Come on, lie next to me and start purring into my ear. Then at least I won't feel lonely." The cat cuddled up next to her and purred so sweetly that the girl fell fast asleep. When she woke around daybreak, she couldn't find the cat anywhere. She reached for the key which was under her head where she put it. The door was locked. The windows were closed. How could the cat have left the room? Well, anyway, if you've left, you've left. You surely know how. When evening came, she lay down once again. The cat returned once more, and so she asked it, "Where have you been? How did you get out?" But the cat just started meowing, and as it opened its mouth, a magnificent diamond rolled onto the floor. The girl picked it up, turned it around in her hand, not knowing quite what it might be. Finally, she put the stone into a pot and pulled the cat next to her. The cat started purring, and the girl fell asleep. This continued for a month and a day. "Just wait, I'm going to find out about that cat," the girl thought. And she did exactly that. When the cat appeared in the evening, she stroked it gently with loving care. The cat put down the gemstone from its mouth, and the girl placed it in the pot. The cat started purring to send the girl to sleep, but this time the girl only pretended to slumber. And all of a sudden, when the cat thought that the girl was already fast asleep, the animal sprang up, stamped once with its foot, the door swung open, and in a moment, it was gone. The girl did the same. She also sprang to her feet and raced after the cat. The cat ran along a long corridor leading into the castle. There were doors on both sides, but the cat did not enter any of them. When it reached the very last room, it stamped with its foot and entered. The girl followed it in. When she stepped into the room, she saw a door opening in the wall. There were stairs leading downwards. The cat started descending. The girl followed it, and lo and behold, there were magnificent trees on both sides of the stairs. The girl broke 2 little twigs from each of them, but when the twigs broke, they started jingling, and this caused the cat to turn around. Had she not hidden behind the tree, it would certainly have discovered her. But the cat decided to walk on, and as it went, the girl heard beautiful music coming from down below. When the cat reached a spot, it did a somersault, and when it landed, it had turned into a heartbreakingly handsome young prince. Music was playing and there were smiling people and great merriment everywhere. The girl observed everything she saw before she finally went back to her room. That evening the cat returned once again, bringing yet another gemstone in its mouth. It dropped it in front of the girl. The girl pretended not to know a thing about it. "You're such a good-for-nothing cat. Where have you been again? You keep escaping from me." But the cat just kept on purring, cajoling the girl, and after a while the girl said, "I know where you've been. I know who you are. I've seen everything. Look at this. This is the proof." The cat let out a scream so loud that all the windows broke. Then it shed its skin, and the girl was looking at a very handsome young prince standing right in front of her. The cat-turned prince said, "I was cursed to live as a cat until a girl came and discovered where I was going. Now that you have discovered my secret, I will let you have all of these gemstones. Sell them to a jeweler and use the money to pay for the castle." And so it happened. The girl paid the price for the castle, she married the prince, the wedding feast was grand, and they both lived happily ever after.